Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at how to set up linear position sensors within our Link G5 and G4X programming. Now, a linear position sensor is going to allow us to translate a voltage to a range of movement. The most common type of linear position sensor would be a throttle position sensor. Now, we're going to always have a throttle position sensor input, regardless if we're going to be dealing with a cable-driven throttle body or drive-by-wire throttle body. We're going to be taking a look in this tutorial at how to set up a cable-driven throttle body throttle position sensor. It's fairly easy to go through that process. We're also going to be taking a look at setting up a shock position sensor. So this would allow you to measure the travel of your shock or suspension. That's good for doing suspension tuning. Learning how your vehicle is reacting in dynamic situations is essential data that you need for a suspension tuner. All right, let's jump in here and take a look at the most basic position sensor to set up. Again, that's going to be our throttle position sensor. First thing we're going to do is move from our basics window here, and we're going to jump over into our analog inputs. We're going to move down here, and the fourth window on the left, we're going to find throttle position sensor. Currently, we're going to see here that the TPS main source is set to none. The source is going to be where we've wired that throttle position sensor into at our link. Now, when we're dealing with a linear position sensor, whether it's going to be a throttle position sensor or a shock potentiometer, we're going to find there's 3 wires for that sensor. One wire is going to go to a 5-volt source supplied from our link. The other is going to go to a sensor ground, also tied into the link. And the last wire is going to be our signal wire, and that's what's going to translate a 0 to 5 volt range of input, and we're going to be able to correlate that to an actual movement once we calibrate things in our software. So what we'll find here is that the throttle position main source, we can see here under none, I'm going to have a bunch of different options to choose from. In my situation, my analog voltage input 1 is going to be my throttle position source. So that's where I've wired the signal wire for my actual sensor. We can see that choice right here. We can go ahead and select that. Now, if you didn't know which specific analog voltage input the sensor was wired into, let's say you're starting off with a fresh project and you don't know where someone has wired and set up a throttle position sensor, you can do some testing real quick. We talked about this in some of our training modules before this one. Let's go here to our tuning window under runtime values. Here, if we go back over to analog in our window, we're going to find that analog voltage input 1. I know where that's wired because I've actually personally wired this myself, the harness I'm working with, so I've designated that, and I have that in an Excel spreadsheet, so I know exactly where my inputs and outputs are tied into. We'll find that that's sitting here currently when I'm off the throttle at 0.56 volt. Now, if I'm trying to figure out which particular analog voltage input is tied to my throttle position sensor, well, I can simply go in and actually just move the throttle pedal with our cable-driven throttle body, and we can see that start to move, and we can know that that's going to be our input. Again, I know that my input is tied to analog voltage 1, so I'm not going to go ahead and do any movement for right now, but we will find that's where I'm going to take a look here under my analog voltage inputs. Whatever is moving in terms of the voltage, as I'm moving my throttle in a cable-driven throttle body setup, that is going to be the input that we need to set up here for our main source. Now, again, I did mention that whether you're cable or drive-by-wire, you will have throttle position sensors to configure. We're going to have separate tutorials on setting up drive-by-wire because it is completely different, but note that drive-by-wire throttle bodies have 2 throttle position sensors, and they're not going to be calibrated in this particular window. This is only for a cable-driven throttle body for a single throttle position sensor. Okay, let's go ahead and close this window out, and let's go here and assign our main source to our analog voltage input 1. Let's click OK here, and now we're going to find we have a couple additional things that we need to correlate here and set up. So first things first, we're going to have our throttle position main closed voltage and throttle position main open voltage. What this is going to do is allow us to calibrate the throttle position sensor between its 0 to 100% opening in the throttle range and movement. Now, we know by going into that runtime value right here, if we jump into the tuning window, we know when I'm off the throttle, it's sitting here at 0.56 volt. Now this is going to vary based on whatever throttle body and throttle position sensor you're dealing with. They can be as low as 0.1 volt. I've seen as high as maybe 0.9, 1.2 volt. It depends again on the particular sensor and its position. That's how it's clocked on the throttle body. But we'll find that the typical range will be somewhere in that when you're off the throttle. Now, we could go in and just take a look here at what the main source is showing us and enter that in here for the closed voltage. Notice it's at 0.5 volt. So we could go in.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.